friends, Heidi here from Rain Country. God is good all the time. And I'm out here in my greenhouse today because I wanted to do a garden update and also talk a little bit more about some other things that I forgot to mention in my gardening tips for newbies, and I'm going to be talking about that too. But I'm in the greenhouse mostly because, well, this is where some of the action's going on, as well as, well, it's raining. You can probably hear. Again, this is Rain Country, 120 inches of rain on average, and that's a low average for us annually. And if you're curious to how that compares to your area, just type in to your browser the name of your city, state, and average annual rainfall, and you'll be able to come up with a number so you can compare the difference. Right now you can see my tomato starts. They've actually slowed down quite a bit since I moved them out here because it is obviously colder out here. We haven't got into a very warm time. We've had some nice days, but even here in the greenhouse at this time of year, it's not super warm. But I did need to get them moved into bigger pots and out of the house. They're doing fine. They're gonna really start taking off once the weather really warms up. But I don't mind that they're going slow right now because with the rain, I do like to let the chickens roam in here free as much as they can, especially on wet days. So I don't mind having to wait a little bit before I put these in the ground because I want the chickens to be able to hang out in here as much as they can. And so if they can slow down a little bit, that's fine. I mean, they're still growing. They're just not growing as fast as they were in the house. But I'm not worried about that. So when I go to plant these in the ground, all I'm going to do is loosely take, very carefully, just kind of turn the pot on its side and just sort of shake it a little bit and let the tomato plants sort of break apart a little bit on their own. And what doesn't, I just gently pull them apart. If the roots get somewhat disturbed, the tomatoes don't mind. That's what's so great about transplanting tomatoes and why I can get away with doing this with them. Dear, it's getting louder. Sorry about that. Now let me talk a little bit about what's going on out front. I got a video clip right here. So I kind of just did a walk starting from the deck. You can see my strawberries are coming along right along the edge of the deck there next to the garden side. And then, as some of you who are new, we did fence in that front yard section to keep the chickens safe, as well as keeping them from going out on the street and anything like that. And just to kind of keep them located in one area to keep working the soil there until we're ready to keep them from going out there altogether. So my potatoes have long since been planted, so I'm just waiting for them to come up. That's what you'll see. Those overturned plant baskets are there to just protect the planted tomatoes from being dug up by the chickens. I put a stake in each one to hold the basket in place so the chickens don't move them with their big, strong, powerful feet. And then you can see a couple of my rhubarbs. My quince tree is also starting to leaf out. So last year, the quince tree, out of the 3 new fruit trees that we bought last year, was the only one to actually produce. We got 1 quince off of it. So hopefully this year we'll see some fruit on the 2 cherry trees, and then the plum tree that we transplanted from back here in a pot to out front didn't get any fruit last year, but I'm thinking it'll do really good this year. Those plum trees we have are pretty hardy. And I hope it's not too loud. I'm just gonna keep going. I wanted to shoot this outside, but I knew this would happen, so it's either stand outside in the rain or stand here and listen to the noise, because obviously it's louder in the greenhouse. So anyway, a couple of pointers I wanted to add is, obviously if you have chickens, don't forget to use clean out your chicken coop once in a while. Take all that, and that's going to be the perfect stuff to put on your potatoes and your corn, just like the grass clippings. You can put that on there straight from the chicken coop. It's not going to hurt your potatoes or your corn. For other plants, it's best to let it sit and ferment and just really break down for several months before you put it on your other plants. But and your blueberries too. Your blueberries will love it, especially if they're in pots. They're going to need it even more, because when you're growing your blueberries in pots like I do, you do need to kind of make sure they're getting plenty of goodness. So I'm always sowing coffee grounds, blood meal, and grass clippings, and then the stuff from the chicken coop is great. And then I also wanted to talk some more about how you make your garden more pest resistant. One of the biggest mistakes in conventional gardening is doing long rows of just one type of crop and have it all one crop in one area. That's going to make your plants more likely to be devastated by some kind of insect, whatever it is. And so mixing your plants up and going with more of a companion planting is the best way to do it. Now what I do in my main garden, and I'll be putting some pictures here from, you know, years past, last year, year before last, I'll clear back to at least 2016, where I plant things like lavender, feverfew, catnip. These are even mints to a degree. Obviously, well, catnip is a mint, but certain mints are better at staying a little more localized, like lemon balm and catnip. Those are the ones you're going to be less likely to have to worry about overtaking your garden than like you would spearmint, peppermint, orange mint, those kind of mints. Those ones are mojito mint. Those ones are best to try to find a peripheral area to put a like I have some mojito mint growing along the edge, outside edge of my main garden bed. So some of those are, it's best to try to keep it on the outside or it will overtake, but they usually, if your garden soil is loose, they're usually pretty easy to just pull up and maintain and keep in a certain area, but it just depends on where you're growing it. The lavender and the mints in particular are things a lot of pests don't like. Same thing with onions and garlic. You can spread those around most things. Now technically you're not supposed to grow onions and garlic next to your beans, but as I said in my last video, I've grown onions right next to beans and they both did beautifully. So it really just depends. But really with the garlic, I have it planted everywhere. I just put it everywhere, and whether I dig it up or not doesn't matter. To me, it's something that I can grow around to help keep the pests out. And this also applies to rodent type pests as well. Most of them don't like going around mints and lemon balm and lavender, so it's a really good way to do that. On top of that, like a lot of you have probably heard of the Three Sisters method, where you grow your beans around your corn, your climbing beans, your pole beans, and then you put the squash at the base. That has several purposes. Now, I don't necessarily do that. I've tried the beans around the corn, but I like to plant my beans earlier than that, and the beans grow faster than the corn, so it doesn't work really good here to do it that way, unless you're planting the beans around the corn a lot later than I like to start my beans. That's just one example. The squash growing around the corn helps keep certain wildlife away from the corn and the beans. The beans provide nitrogen for the corn, and the corn gives the beans something to climb on, so that's how that works. Well, that kind of goes along with a whole bunch of other things. Borage is another thing I just kind of let grow wherever it wants to grow. It just self-seeds easily. If it gets too thick, I just pull it up and chop it up, give it to the chickens, or throw it down on the soil because it's really good for the soil, but it also draws in the bees, so I just let that grow wherever it wants unless it's too thick. Like last year, it was getting a little too thick in my little corn patch, so I had to pull a whole bunch up. Obviously, you don't want it to totally shade out your plants. Don't grow all your beets in one row. Put a little here and a little bit there, and what that does is it also confuses the insects, you know, because there's too many other things going on. It's like too much noise. Think of it as either listening to a beautiful classical violin being played and then a whole bunch of other instruments being played all in a different tune, a different key. It's like it's too chaotic, and what that does is it confuses a lot of the pests, so they're less likely to totally devastate a whole crop. It's going to be much easier to contain and keep control of when you do it that way. And I found it works really well for us. So, you know, if we have radicchio or we have red mustard that wants to come up wherever it wants to come up, I'll let that grow a little bit here and there unless it gets too big, and then I'll just thin it out. That's all I do. It's a simple, it's the way things grow in nature, just like the whole idea of the way I throw my compost just right in the garden. And no, I have had very little problems with throwing the compost on top of my garden like that, drawing in bugs. The most it does is that as far as slugs go, it gives the slugs something else to eat rather than the plants. So that's another more natural way that actually does work for us. So even pulling up, like taking dandelion leaves and certain other leaves and throwing them down there, the slugs are more likely to eat those than they will actually attack the live plants, I've discovered. So, and yes, I know all about copper, I know about beer in containers, I know about a whole bunch of the other stuff. Unless you live in a place that gets the great amount of slugs that we do and the hardy kind of slugs that we have, it's kind of hard to fathom how those kind of things just really don't work. I've tried those things many times in many different ways. They don't work. And honestly, copper does not work. They will go right over the copper, they'll go right over crushed eggshells, and then obviously salt will kill them, but you don't want salt around your plants. You know, too much salt is just gonna kill the plants, and we get so much rain it just keeps washing this stuff away, and so it's absolutely useless, and it just wasted the money. So that's why those kind of things don't work. So our chickens have been our best defense against slugs, and hand picking, and then like I said, putting down just little, think of it as feeding the slugs something else that you would rather have them eat than your garden itself, and that does help. So and I always forget to mention that one. And then the other thing I wanted to say about in the garden tips is that I was getting to it, but I never did actually say it. I realized later was, what is the absolute best garden method? Every year, I swear, there's a new garden method or a new name for maybe an older garden method, or it's an old garden method that somebody kind of added their twist to and then put a name on it, and it can be confusing. Don't worry about all that. Don't worry about that. You know, if you want to look into it, fine, but don't go by what somebody else says is the best method. A lot of people swear by the Back to Eden garden method, and a lot of people find it absolutely does not work for them. Here, with our great slug population, even though Squim, where Paul Gauchi lives, is only 75 miles away from us, they don't have the slug problem we do here. We get probably about 4 times the amount of rain they ever get, maybe more than that, because Squim is basically in a sun belt where they just don't get, I think they're the driest place on the peninsula of Washington State. And so what he does isn't always going to work for us where we're at. And if anybody that knows anything about slugs, they love to hide under wood. That includes wood chips. They're going to go in there, they're going to lay their eggs, it's going to increase your slug population. So it's not the best method here. Now we do use wood shavings, but that's a little bit different. That's not wood chips, and we can mix that in with the soil. Again, the point of that is just because somebody else says it's the absolute best method, and some people can get rather sanctimonious about it, ignore that. If it works for them, that's wonderful and that's great. If it doesn't work for you, try something else and don't feel like you're a failure just because it didn't work. It just means that you have different needs for your area and the type of garden that you're trying to grow, and just keep working with it. And this is why getting started early in gardening, if you want to get some serious produce, you have to start early, because you have to work with your own climate and area to find out what are going to be your challenges and what are going to be your pluses, and how can you make it work for you. So some of the things we do, like I said, for years I did a completely no-till garden, but for the last couple years, well, except for when we did till up the main garden area just to break up the soil so we can plant in it, but most of the time I just let a lot of my garden areas, we just layer. Throw on the grass clippings, throw on the leaves, throw on the horse manure, throw on more kitchen compost. That's usually how we do it. But the last 2 years we've decided to till the main garden area just because, and then in the greenhouse, you know, because the chickens get in here, and we're just trying to mix in some of that goodness. But layering is really an excellent way to do it, and it's super, super easy. And just keep doing that throughout the year. Okay, well, I hope I said all the things I meant to say this time, but if not, I'll cover it in my next garden update video. Oh, and this might be a couple days before it publishes, so just so you know what today is, it's actually March 29th, 2020. So hopefully I'll get this out within a few days. And if you have any more questions, put them down below, and I'll try to get to them. It's getting harder and harder for me to keep up on all the comments and questions because our channel's been exploding and our Etsy store's been exploding, but I'll do my best. And if I don't answer it there, I'll try to answer it in the next garden video. All right, thanks for watching. Take care, and God bless.